if we could. Don, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great, Tom. Thanks for having me back. It's been a couple of 2 or 3 weeks or a month, and but you're continuing to do the Lord's work. We appreciate your strong voice for the Constitution and for conservative causes, and so I'm just grateful to be with you again today.
Well, I'm grateful you joined me, Don. I'm glad to call you a friend, and I appreciate and have immense respect for what you did, run for Senate down there in North Carolina. I know that you took a lot of your time, your money, and you just busted your hump on this. So Thank you for that. What do you got next? What's happening? What's next for you?
Well, thank you. We did jump into the Senate race, and at the time that we jumped in, I challenged Senator Tillis, who needed to go. And on the one hand, Senator Tillis is gone. So we half accomplished our mission. When Tillis dropped out, the administration got behind Mike Whatley and endorsed him. We knew that it was going to be a monumental challenge, but stayed in the race and wound up second out of 7 in the field. And, we're looking at some things now. We've gotten a lot of calls from folks all around the state asking us to consider the possibility of a NC Attorney General run. We've not made a decision on that, where it's just sort of putting our ear to the railroad tracks. But we're going around speaking. I've been speaking recently on Sharia law in several venues, and folks are really anxious to hear that and have been arguing we need to take away First Amendment protection as a religion for Sharia, which is kind of out there, but we're making that argument, and people are listening, and we're writing some op-eds. We had an op-ed come out a couple of weeks ago on calling for the North Carolina Attorney General to investigate gain-of-function research at the University of North Carolina, which Fauci was feeding money to Ralph Barrett. So we're staying active, writing, doing interviews, going around meeting folks, and doing everything we can to continue to spread the truth of constitutional conservatism and America first. And so just try to still fight the good fight. As I mentioned to you off the air, losing an election is like losing a single battle in a larger war. Pearl Harbor did not go so well for us, but Midway did, and so did some other battles. So we're still in a long-term war for the survival of the Republic, and I'm not going anywhere as long as the good Lord gives me decent enough health and an opportunity to stay in the fight. We're going to do it, just like I know that you are too, Tom.
Well, amen, brother. And it's up to a few of us that are willing to stand on principle. There's not many, and we got a long road ahead of us to get back to people who are governing from a position of principle. So I'm glad. I tell you what, I would be ecstatic to see you run for AG in North Carolina, because if we had a couple, 1 or 2 good state AGs make all the difference. You look at some of the things that were done. What's his name in Missouri, who's now a senator.
Right.
Did a great job at AG. Ken Paxton's doing some great things.
Yeah,
a state AG is a huge deal. A guy like you being there would be phenomenal, and I'd love to see that.
Thank you. Go ahead. Well, it's interesting in North Carolina. You're absolutely correct. I think Ken Paxton is the best AG in the country. Eric Schmidt did a fabulous job in Missouri. Missouri versus Biden was a case that the Supreme Court should have affirmed from the appeals court. But they were out front calling out the Biden administration for using social media giants as an instrument to suppress free speech. They were absolutely right. And even though the Supreme Court did not take the case up and affirm it, it essentially shut down a lot of the censorship. You were joking earlier about being, I've been in Facebook, jail in the past, and Twitter jail and everything. So we know what that's like. But the AG positions are certainly very influential within the states. And North Carolina is an interesting state in many ways. On the one hand, some things are looking better for the Republicans in that North Carolina, within the last few months, Republican registration has eclipsed Democrat registration. But of course, independent registration has eclipsed them both. But the trend is in the right direction. And historically, when you go back to the last 15 presidential elections in North Carolina, beginning with Humphrey v. Nixon in '68, the Republican presidential candidates have won 13 out of those 15. The Democrats only won twice. Jimmy Carter's first term, he lost the second term to Reagan, and Obama's first term, lost the second term, in the re-election bid in North Carolina. At least there's a General Assembly that's Republican here. The NC Senate is veto-proof. The NC House is almost veto-proof and was before the last midterm, and I hope we can get that back. We've got a Republican Supreme Court, Republican Court of Appeals. But the odd thing about North Carolina is that we have not had a Republican Attorney General elected since 1898 and have not had a Republican Secretary of State elected since 1872. And of course, it is those two offices that are the most powerful offices overseeing election integrity. The Secretary of State, of course, runs elections in North Carolina, and the Attorney General is the legal arm for enforcing integrity on multiple fronts. And so it's an odd situation. They've controlled those two offices, and they've had a monolithic block on them. They controlled the Treasury since 1896. In 2016, we busted that hold in North Carolina, with Dale Folwell being elected as the first Republican treasurer since 1872. I don't mean to go too deep into a history lesson here, but these are crucial Council of State positions that Republicans and conservatives, let me just say conservative Republicans, need to get in those offices. And we have a very strong Secretary of State candidate named Bob Winstead, and I was at his campaign kickoff last night. Others could jump in, but these are very, very important positions for sure.
Well, that's really interesting. One of the things that you said that's really, really important, and I don't want to gloss over it, and I'm curious what you're seeing in North Carolina, because it's emblematic of what we're seeing everywhere, is that the registration that has eclipsed everything is independence.
Yeah, right.
And what I'm seeing, and I'm curious whether you'd agree and what you think's going on in NC, is the Republicans, they hate the base, right? People are moving to America First. America First is a tremendously popular concept. I mean, realistically, Trump kind of pushed out and fought for this mega America First type concept. And then he kind of gets there, and we're not seeing so much of that. We're seeing more of this kind of, doing all these things that we weren't supposed to do. Foreign wars. We can't pass legislation. We didn't do the DOJ cuts. All these things kind of fell by the wayside. And then we support people like we endorse people like Lindsey Graham, go after people like Tom Massey. There's a lot of people that are very disaffected. And if you follow what's going on online, it's kind of interesting because you see what I would characterize as fake polls. You see these polls that say, 100% of MAGA supports Donald Trump. But what they're not saying is a tremendous number of the people who were registered Republicans who were calling themselves MAGA are no longer doing that. They're now moving to independent because they're very frustrated at the fact that we have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican president, and can't pass anything that the base cares about.
Right.
Are you seeing that?
Well, yeah. And the thing is, look, there are two existential threats, I believe. The two principal existential threats are the national debt that continues to explode, now moving toward $40 trillion, moving in that direction very quickly. It endangers the dollar, and they're going to seek to replace the dollar with a cryptocurrency controlled by a centralized bank. And then, of course, the other thing is you've got the radical Islamic infiltration. And a lot of folks, as an aside to that, are extremely frustrated by the Republican Senate's refusal to modify the filibuster rules to allow the Save America Act to be passed. And folks are frustrated beyond all get out. A lot of people don't think about the national debt. Maybe you and I do. We're a little more policy wonkish, but folks don't think about it. But it's a dangerous ticking time bomb. But people can see the lack of action on the SAVE Act. I mean, and Thune has refused to tweak the filibuster rule. Just go back to a speaking filibuster. But we're not getting the reforms that we wanted to see. And some of us on the president, a lot of us on the Congress, but there's a lot of blame to go around, and there's a lot of frustration out there for sure.
Yeah,
no question. And lack of prosecutions. I mean, that's another thing. Where are the prosecutions? I had a book come out, Kangaroo Court. We talked about that earlier, just when I was last on with you, I think, discussing the political prosecutions against not just President Trump, but other Republican leaders and ordinary citizens, like the couple in St. Louis, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, prosecuted for holding weapons, or the cartoonist Douglas Mackey. We had Thomas on our mind. Douglas Mackey, who in 2016 just drew a cartoon lampooning Hillary voters, and in 2021 Biden prosecutes him.
Yeah.
And so we aren't seeing prosecutions to go after those folks who attacked the Constitution with these frivolous, bastardizations of the criminal justice system. And so folks are frustrated, lack of prosecutions and lack of tangible improvements against election fraud. Yeah, people are very, very frustrated for sure, Tom. No doubt about that.
Well, I would agree. And I think that the lack of prosecutions is the most foundational issue we have. I mean, our DOJ is broken entirely. Pam Bondi was one of the worst attorney generals in history. She might be worse. She might have successfully found a way to be worse than Bill Barr and Sessions, which is saying something, at least the worst Republican. I don't know if I would put her, Merrick Garland bad, but she certainly wasn't good. And, at the end of the day, her lack of doing anything other than covering up for people and making excuses was appalling. I mean, people are sickened by the fact that, if there was one thing I would say that got Donald Trump elected, it was draining the swamp. People wanted accountability. And there's literally been zero, literally absolutely no accountability whatsoever. And it's abhorrent. But again, thus the importance of some of the state AGs, because we need to have someone that's doing something. But this is really a foundational issue. I mean, you and I as lawyers, Don, I've said this a few times, and people say, listen, these cases take time. It's very difficult. Don, if you have the resources of the United States Attorney General and you want to put together a RICO case against Arabella or some subsidiary of Arabella or whoever it was that was tied with, say placing bricks at a protest site, inciting violence, organizing riots, these sorts of things. That's sort of a case. And I've seen Data Republican, some of these people, just online sleuths who've thrown together this data in very, very strong ways, enough to pass muster, I would argue, certainly to get a grand jury indictment. I mean, this whole thing, realistically, for a complex RICO case, with the resources you have at the AG, worst case scenario, 3 to 4 months. Do you disagree with me?
I fully agree with you. Look, here's the thing. The United States government, Justice Department has unlimited resources. And this excuse is complex. It takes a time, time continues to tick. Pam Bondi wasted a year. We've seen a little bit out of Blanche, made a little bit more, not much. I am pleased about the Southern Poverty Leadership Conference prosecution. We're going to have to prosecute some individual actors in their organization. But here's the way I would frame it. Look how quickly the Democrat Justice Department under Merrick Garland brought indictment after indictment after indictment. Even Fani Willis with the bogus RICO claim that she put together in Atlanta, that thing got put together even though it has no real basis to it. So the Democrat Justice Departments throw these things together like flipping pancakes at Waffle House that quickly because they've got the resources to do it. The notion that they're so complex that it takes years to develop is ridiculous. There should have been multiple indictments out there. I've taken a position and continue to do so that if you bring, for example, a political prosecution that is one which is primarily political in nature, that is an assault on the Constitution itself, and it should be prosecutable. I'd like to see Jack Smith, Fani Willis, Alvin Bragg, every one of them should face the music for what they did. But it is just. They're just dragging their feet for no articulable reason, and I don't know what's going to happen, whether Blanche is going to be the guy or not. But the speed of the Justice Department, or the lack of speed, I should say, the Justice Department in not moving and equalizing our justice system is appalling. And Tom, if you don't bring these prosecutions, if and when they ever take the Justice Department bat, you better watch out. The only way to deter them is to show that we mean business. And if they get back in power, they've got to look at their shoulder and say, hey, if we try these shenanigans again, we could be facing the music ourselves. But when you let them get off scot-free, they've got no deterrent, no incentive at all to avoid the type of illegal Constitution-bashing shenanigans when they bastardized our court system in the United States during the Democrat years.
Well, and you and I know that real well. If you or I, as private attorneys, try and go after a federal prosecutor or federal judge, we're done. We're going to lose our license. We're going to be sanctioned or everything else. But these federal prosecutors, they can get away with doing these half-ass cases that are nothing but political. And there's no consequences, none whatsoever. This is an appalling and egregious abuse of power, in my opinion, and one of the most dangerous threats to our Constitution out there. I mean, if the judicial branch is not seen as independent, if the people have no arbiter, no fair arbiter of corruption, then, I mean, that leads to very, very dangerous circumstances historically in any nation. And I think it's foundational. And the fact that accountability was so foundational to Trump's election, and that we haven't just failed in bringing accountability, we've just thumbed our nose at the whole concept. I don't think, I mean, I know you're a student of history. I know you're a smart guy, and I know that you do a great job as an attorney. This is think about when you're representing a client. You know, Don, you or I were representing a client. They feel aggrieved. They feel like they've been injured. They feel like they've been hurt. And then when they don't feel like they're getting a fair trial, they're furious. And on a national level, if people start feeling that way, that doesn't lead anywhere good for our country.
The political prosecutions during the Obama and Biden years showed the American people that we were tolerating a two-tiered system of justice. I mean, going back to some of the cases I discussed in Kangaroo Court, Douglas Mackey was prosecuted for his political views against Hillary Clinton. Yeah, and they packaged them as something else. Election interference. That's garbage. The McCloskeys, who were Democrat attorneys, by the way, in St. Louis, were prosecuted for their political views because they were holding guns, which is a little thing in the Constitution called the Second Amendment that gives us the right to bear arms, and it shall not be infringed. You know, but because the prosecutor there was a George Soros-elected prosecutor, Kim Gardner, she found ways of bringing felony charges. These are attacking people for their beliefs. There are a couple of pro-life fathers. I think of Paul Vaughn in Tennessee and Mark Houck in Philadelphia, who prosecuted over a year after local authorities declined to prosecute, but they were prosecuted in retaliation for the Supreme Court's decision in the Dobbs case. So they're prosecuted in this FACE Act. These are American citizens being prosecuted for their thoughts. And the prosecutors that brought these actions need to be held to account. And conservatives and America First Americans understood that we were falling off a cliff. We were on the verge of absolute tyranny when you could be prosecuted for your thoughts. Even the whole COVID scam situation, when they were shutting you down if you question why in the world are we pushing an experimental mRNA quote unquote vaccine on. If you raised a question, if you raise questions about clear medical research from Johns Hopkins, UNC, Duke, you name it, that showed, surgical masks do not stop viral penetration, they shut you down and in some cases even try to prosecute. And people saw that. And yet the perpetrators of these frauds are getting off scot-free. You go back to Pam Bondi and look at what happened when she tried to bring an action initially against Jim Comey and Patricia James. She let the statute of limitations run without overcomplicating these things, didn't bring the case within 180 days. 180 days ran. She tried to appoint a prosecutor who then did not have standing to bring the case, and the statute of limitations basically is run on Comey there when he could have easily been prosecuted. It's absolute abhorrent incompetence. And this is what's driving a lot of frustration. It concerns me. It
Don,
does.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. I don't for a second believe that was incompetence. The black letter of the law was very, very clear. When Comey's case got thrown out, this was not a matter of an activist judge. this was the right decision because it was illegal. It was not a lawful. It was, and this is the kind of thing that an amateur attorney would be able to do better than this. Not the AG of the United States. I think it was intentional. Okay, sorry about that, folks. We had a little bit of a technical glitch. It happens, especially when we're talking about corruption. It seems like every time we talk about corruption, we just had a few days ago, Don, where I was talking about the CIA's involvement in the creation of SARS-CoV-2 and the vaccines, which, of course, I actually testified in Congress on, and it was probably the single most covered up testimony in history. But, shockingly, every time I talk about specific types of corruption, I run into technical glitches. We don't have any technical glitches when I'm talking about dolphins or clouds or happy things. But anytime I'm talking about corruption, with our DOJ and CIA, and it just seems consistent issues. I don't know what the deal is.
And you mentioned the SPLC, and off we go when that happens. So.
Yeah. And the corruption, I don't believe Todd Blanche is going to do anything. I don't believe the SPLC is going to get shut down. I don't believe that there's going to be anybody go to jail. I think they'll throw the case just like they did the Comey case, just like they did the Diddy case, just like they did anything else they've done. The joke of a case, a couple cases that they did up in Minnesota, there's no accountability, and I think it'll be the same thing. I don't think that this DOJ wants to put anybody in jail. What do you think? Have you looked at the SPLC case? Do you have any faith on this?
Well, yes, I've read the indictment. I'll talk about that in a second. First of all, your prediction is based upon track record. It's hard to argue with it. It's hard to argue. It's hard to be optimistic this thing will be seen through. But let me just mention a couple things about SPLC. First off, the notion that it calls itself a Southern Poverty Law Center is an oxymoron. It has an endowment, by all accounts, over $100 million. Nothing impoverished about it. Two, in recent decades, they've gotten into a habit of labeling conservatives, that is their political opponents, as hate groups. If you get on their list as a hate group, you're doing something good. So they have been all over the place. They are supposed to be a charitable organization which holds itself out to stamp out, it's about hold themselves out to stamp out racism, to stamp out the Ku Klux Klan, to stamp out, the area to pick your nationalist group that they go after. But yet, at the same time, it appears that what they've been doing is professional race baiting. In other words, I've read the indictment. It accuses them of raising money and then using that money to infiltrate opposition groups to actually flame the fire of racism. Take, for example, Charlottesville. Part of the indictment indicates that over $700,000. I'm trying to think of the number. $200,000. I believe the number was infiltrated into one of the organizers of the Charlottesville event to help stoke the fires of the event, so then they can turn around and say, look what we have here. We have a horrible, situation where you have the Klan involved and the Aryan Nation involved. They raise money after they create the event. It's called race baiting. And, we've seen it. Jesse Jackson was a race baiter to a large degree. The Reverend Al Sharpton is even worse. But this is what the SPLC is being accused of. They, in fact, have used money they've raised after claiming that their objective is to shut these groups down, when they funnel money into the groups so that they can keep the fire burning, so they can raise money off that. It is absolutely corrupt, as the allegation is. Now, here's the thing about it. The SPLC itself has been indicted. It is an organization. You can indict an organization. You can indict a business. You can indict a charitable group, but it's not going to do any good unless you bring individual officers or individual defendants to bear by criminal prosecutions against individuals. It hasn't happened yet. Ordinarily, when an indictment is there's not been a single individual.
I was under the impression that they had some of the directors that they're going after too. So that's the game on this one. They're not actually going to do anything.
Well, the speculation is that is going to happen because ordinarily you will see an indictment against the organization first. Next thing you know, it might be the CEO, the vice president, whoever, and I don't know who they are targeted specifically, but unless you start to bring in some major scalps, it does no good. But that organization ought to be busted up. It ought to be busted up and put on the ash heap of history. But you said just a moment ago, Tom, that given the track record of this DOJ, you may see stalling, and of course, if you lose the House of Representatives, which could happen. We hope that it doesn't, or if you lose the Senate. But, you're going to be involved in sidetracking and impeachment stuff, and you're going to lose a lot of the steam that you had coming out of this massive Trump victory in 2024. And it's a situation where it's pretty much now or never. Here we are, the midterms are right around the corner. And if you don't hold both of the House of Representatives, you got no shot. And if you do hold them, and we've got a majority now, and we're still not seeing anything. So I'm glad to see the indictment come down against the SPLC, but I'll believe that there are going to be individual indictments when I see it. I believe that organization is going to get busted up when I see it, but it certainly should be. It is a corrupt organization.
Well, even if they bust up the organization, under the rules for a C3, all they'll do is they'll roll that huge endowment into some other leftist group and rehire the people in a new organization. It's not going to make any difference at all.
You're absolutely correct.
It's a nothing burger. It's just like everything else. But
Elon Musk did have a good point when he made the accurate point with these NGOs. What you have is, just to kind of break it down in a simplistic manner. First of all, they raise money, and if they're an NGO, they're a 501c3 or whatever, they don't have to pay taxes on the money that is generated inside of the organization. They got to give away 5%. But like if Bill Gates can set up NGO 1. Which gives its 5% NGO 2. He can set up. They circle the money all around. That money winds up in liberal hands. They develop themselves and market themselves as having some sort of altruistic purpose. Save the whales, save the spotted owl, save the Democrats or whatever. They never, and sometimes the altruistic purpose is BS, but they never accomplish the altruistic purpose. They get richer and richer, and the money goes to push leftist organizations. But Tom, this is the product of a corrupt tax system. If you eliminate the income tax, you eliminate the deductions, you could cut them off the head. But unfortunately, we don't seem to have the will in the Congress to make that happen. But it's all part of a big corrupt governmental organization, which starts with a corrupt tax code.